Hi everybody, and welcome to my first Olympus camera video. This is the first Olympus camera I've ever owned, and I actually just picked it up a few days ago, so I've been researching it furiously to do this video. This is an Olympus OMG. It is the original OMG, long before it was popular, as a text message acronym. And in other markets it was called the OM20. OMG was the North American market designation, OM20 was the rest of the world. It's basically the same as the OM10, except that it's got a modified interface over here. The manual function's been added to this style. In the OM10, that wasn't the case. This is an interchangeable lens, single lens reflex camera. In automatic mode, it works as an aperture priority, center-weighted, off the film through the lens metering camera. Center-weighted meaning that there's a circle in the viewfinder, which we'll see in the next video, and that's where the center weighting comes in. The shutter speeds are 14 seconds to 1/1000th, and to come up with everything I read about this said that the slowest shutter speed was more than 10 seconds. So what I did was I set the ASA to the lowest speed, stopped it down all the way, and put the lens cap on, and then hit the shutter at the same time that I hit a stopwatch to see how long it would take, and it was 14 seconds. The viewfinder has a 0.92x magnification with 93% of frame coverage. The focusing screen is a matte field with split ring and a focusing prism ring. And most people don't know this, but the focusing screen on this camera is interchangeable. In fact, you can use the professional level single-digit series focusing screens on the OM20, but there's a little knob or nub somewhere on the screen that you've got to file off before you can put it in, and it's a little bit harder to get the focusing screen into the OM20 than it is into the professional level cameras. And it has an X-Flash sync up here and then in the PC port here that is 1/125th of a second. The camera model's history, the target market for the OM20 was the consumer grade users. People who, it was an inexpensive camera in its day, and it wasn't for people who wanted all of the bells and whistles and complexity of a full professional grade camera, but still wanted a lightweight, very usable, and high-quality shooter that could take really good pictures, meter very well, and function very well with a nice, intuitive interface. And by and large, that's this camera. There's a couple quirks in it that I think are very strange, but we'll get to those as we go on. Olympus produced this camera in Japan from 1982 to 1987. It was preceded by the OM10, also concurrent with the OM10, and followed by the OM30, which was called the OMF in North America, and the OM40 or the OMPC in North America. So now if you have your instruction manual, go ahead and grab that, and what we'll do is we'll go along the top and the front like we do in these videos and take a look at the different features, and then we'll talk about in the second video how they work in concert. Okay, so going along the top of the camera, first we have the rewind knob over here with the rewind crank inside of it. And also, as is standard, when you pull up the rewind knob, that's the back release. We have the mode selector dial, which is this dial right here. Right now you can see that it's an off, but other modes include auto. And auto is an aperture priority mode. Battery check. You can probably hear that annoying, awful sound. Manual. Manual is full manual, and you adjust the shutter speed on the front of the camera and the aperture on the front of the lens, and then it meters and tells you whether you're metered correctly or not. And then, of course, bulb mode. We'll go back to check and just leave it there for the whole video. How's that? Just kidding. I'll be throwing myself out my window, which actually isn't a bad thing. I live on the ground floor. The has an accessory hot shoe right here with the X-Sync contact, and this extra one up here That extra contact is the flash charge and auto check contact. We have a self-timer lever right here, and you use the self-timer by sliding the lever clockwise, and then turn it off by sliding the lever clockwise. And when you use it, as we'll hear later, it beeps. The same beep as the battery check. We have the exposure counter right over here on the side, which will tell you how many frames you've taken. And the film advance lever, which is this lever, so after you take a picture, you advance the film with this lever. The shutter release button right here, which is what you hit to activate the shutter. The film speed window, which is right here next to ASA, and it's set on 100 right now. This is a bit fiddly. We'll talk about that in the next video. And the exposure compensation dial. And what the exposure compensation dial does is allow you to compensate your exposure by up to 2 stops in either direction in third stop increments, which is pretty nice. On the front of the camera, we have the camera lens release, which this is the only camera system I know of like this where the lens release is built into the lens. So you push the button down, and now you can rotate the lens off. Now we can just see the front of the camera by itself without the lens. So we have is the lens release button, which we showed, the manual shutter dial. The manual shutter dial are these two. The manual shutter dial are these two flanges right here. And you rotate them to, you might not be able to see that, that's in pretty bad light. Oh, there you go. There you can see the shutter setting, and that changes the shutter. Unfortunately, it would be nice if they had a little window in that prism, but they don't. If wishes were horses, I'd have a stable full of horses I don't ride. At any rate. So that's the manual shutter adjustment. So when you only use that when you're in manual mode. Anytime you're in auto mode, the camera will automatically select the shutter speed based on your aperture setting and the light meter reading. We also have the rewind release lever. In most cameras, in fact in every other camera I've ever seen, the rewind button is on the bottom. That's not the case here. You rotate that a quarter turn counterclockwise, and now you can rewind the film. And it automatically resets when you activate the shutter release, or when you move the shutter release lever, or the film advance lever rather. Then you have the self-timer and battery check light, which is right here. So we'll go back into battery check mode. You can see, you might not be able to see. Go back into battery check mode. You can see the light comes on like that. We'll go and hit the self-timer. And you can see the light flashes as it beeps. The mirror goes up part way, and then comes back down the whole way. There we go. And the mirror goes up part way, I would imagine, for some metering, but I'm not sure why. Many cameras, the mirror just goes up all the way. Maybe my copy of this just doesn't work perfectly. Any of those is possible. We also have the steady grip right here. This is a little grip that screws into the front of the camera. There's nothing underneath it. If you have the motor drive, then the motor drive screws in there instead. We have the self-timer and battery check speaker right here. This is the speaker that was making that hideous beeping noise that we heard earlier. And the PC socket over on the side. This is the flash sync socket. And then lastly, the strap lugs. On the camera back is fairly standard. We've got the viewfinder eyepiece right here, and this camera does have some accessory grooves that for accessories that fit over the eyepiece. And we have the film back right here, and the memo holder where you would put the lid of your film box to remind you of what type of film you have in there. On the bottom, we have the battery chamber over here, and this takes 2 LR44 batteries, the motor drive right here, tripod bushing, the motor drive electrical contacts, and this is the motor drive alignment pinhole. So there's a little pin on the motor drive that pops right in there. Inside the camera, if I can get this open, we've got the film chamber and the film spool crank attachment right there, film chamber, film rails, film guide rails, the standard 4 film guide rails, 2 that keep the film in place and then 2 that help keep it flat on plane. The cloth focal plane horizontal travel shutter. We've got a film pin, a film guide pin that helps set up the film to advance smoothly. The film advance sprocket and the film take-up spool over here. On the camera door, we have the film back right here and a spring to help keep the cassette in place. And unlike many professional level cameras, there is not there's no series of rollers in here that help keep the camera alignment, the camera film aligned steadily and flat on the plane. Now, some additional notes. For instance, this camera requires the battery in order to function. If you don't have the battery, then the shutter will not function. It's like the Pentax 6x7, if you've seen that video. If you take the battery out, then the mirror comes up part way and stays there, and you have to put the battery back in to finish the operation. So the shutter and mirror are controlled by the battery's power. And a couple of camera don'ts. Do not touch the shutter. It's a good way to brick your camera, and these can still be repaired. There's a guy who is repairing Olympus cameras, at least one, and so they can be repaired, but parts for these haven't been made in a long time, so who knows how readily available spares are. Don't touch the mirror because you'll de-silver it, and if you take the silver off your mirror, you'll have a harder time focusing, and your viewfinder won't be as bright. Do not leave your camera or lenses in your car, because that can cause heat damage and ruin your cameras very quickly. Do not store your gear in a plastic bag, because that's a good way for a little bit of moisture to get in there and cause fungus on your lenses or camera. Don't let your camera get wet, so don't take it out in the rain. Don't drop it in a swimming pool or your toilet or something like that. And just remember that your camera is a precision tool, and it should be treated with care and respect. And as long as you do that, it's going to last you a very long time, because these are very reliable and well-made cameras. Now, if you have this concludes the first video. We're going to go over to the second video in just a minute and talk about how some of these features function in concert and help you to take good pictures. But if this video so far has been helpful, please give me a thumbs up. You can also subscribe with the button that's on the lower left. And if you have any comments, please leave them, and I respond fairly quickly. Also, if you have suggestions for future videos, let me know. I'm always interested in hearing those, and if I have the equipment and technical knowledge, I'm more than happy to make them. And lastly, thank you guys for watching.